I should have known better than to trust a house that still smelled like my childhood nightmares. The moment I stepped into my father's remodeled farmhouse in Ashwood, Oregon, with Lily clinging to my hip in her little yellow dress, something deep inside me recoiled. The walls might have been freshly painted, the floors polished to a cold gleam, but the air still carried that sour blend of old coffee, carpet cleaner, and unspoken cruelty, and I hated that I recognized it. Late as always, my father, Peter Adams, muttered without looking at me. His voice sliced through the polite laughter drifting from the backyard like a knife through paper. Beside him, Ellen, my stepmother, flashed a brittle smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sweetheart, you made it," she chirped, voice sticky sweet and full of venom. I adjusted Lily against my hip and forced a smile. She didn't deserve to feel my dread. She pointed at a stray balloon arch by the patio door, babbling excitedly about moons and doggies. My heart squeezed. She was my whole world, the only part of it I had built with love. Peter's eyes finally dropped to Lily. His lip curled slightly. "So that's her, huh?" he said, as if inspecting a used car someone regretted buying. I hugged Lily tighter. Without missing a beat, he added under his breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "Could have done better." The words hit harder than they should have. I thought I had built walls high enough to keep his poison out. I was wrong. I tried to focus on the buffet of lukewarm casseroles and oversweet punch, on the meaningless chatter of cousins I barely recognized. I laughed when appropriate, nodded at the right moments. Pretended I didn't feel Peter's eyes on me, sharp and assessing, like he was searching for weaknesses. When Lily tugged at my sleeve, asking for water in her babbling toddler way, I seized the excuse to duck into the kitchen. The moment I let her go, even for those few minutes, I felt the prickle at the back of my neck. Something was wrong. I heard it before I saw it, the sharp, panicked cry of my daughter. I dropped the plastic cup from my hand and sprinted back into the living room, heart slamming against my ribs. The scene froze in front of me, Peter standing awkwardly in the center of the room, holding Lily like she was a sack of groceries he didn't know what to do with. Her face was twisted in fear, little fists thrashing, and Peter barked out she needs to toughen up, just like her weak-ass mother never did. I crossed the room in 2 strides. "Give her to me," I hissed, reaching for Lily. Peter smirked, turned half toward the crowd of relatives, and shouted, "She disgraced this family first, and now she wants applause for dragging another mistake into our lives." The room erupted in a sickening mix of gasps and nervous laughter. I barely registered it. I saw Peter shift his feet, a mocking stumble, and then, with horrifying slowness, Lily slipped from his arms. She hit the floor with a wet, sickening thud. For a moment, there was nothing. No sound. No movement. The world collapsed inward. I think I screamed. People told me later I did. All I remember was the silence, and then Lily's piercing, breathless wail that ripped the air apart. I shoved past Peter, who stood frozen, arms still half extended like he was balancing blame in the air. I scooped Lily up, running my hands frantically over her tiny body. No blood. Her limbs flailed, her face scrunched in agony. She was breathing, she was alive, but I wasn't taking any chances. "I'm taking her to the ER," I said, my voice shaking, already moving toward the door. "That's dramatic," Peter sneered behind me. "She's fine." I spun, cradling Lily against my chest like a shield. My voice was razor sharp. "You don't get to decide that." No one moved to stop me. Not Ellen. Not my cousins. Not a single damn person. I caught a glimpse of Samantha, only Samantha, hand to her mouth, eyes wide with horror, but even she didn't say a word. The sun outside was still shining. The balloons still floated lazily against a perfect blue sky. But my world had already collapsed into ash. I slammed the car door behind me, Lily's sobs echoing in my ears, and drove toward the hospital like my life depended on it, because it did, because hers did. And deep down, beneath the terror, the rage had already begun to burn. I was never going to let that man near us again. Not ever. The tires screamed against the pavement as I sped toward Ashwood Regional Hospital, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly I thought they might snap. Lily's cries had faded into hiccuping sobs, but I couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds, checking, rechecking, obsessively watching the small rise and fall of her chest. The 20-minute drive felt endless. Every red light, every slow-moving car felt like a personal attack against the urgency thrumming in my veins. I whispered nonsense to Lily the whole way. Promises that she was okay, that everything was going to be fine, that I had her. When we finally screeched into the ER parking lot, I didn't even bother locking the car. I yanked the door open, cradled Lily against me, and sprinted into the hospital like the ground itself was collapsing behind me. The nurse at the front desk took one look at us and waved me straight through triage. The questions blurred together. Name, age, what happened, when? I answered on autopilot, voice shaking so badly I barely recognized it. She was dropped, I said, from adult height onto a hard floor. She hit her head. I don't know what else. Please help her. Within minutes, they had Lily on a small examination bed, her tiny arms flailing as they checked her vitals. The fluorescent lights made her skin look almost translucent. I hovered, useless, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the murmur of nurses and machines around us. The attending physician, a young woman with steady hands and a calm voice, knelt beside me. We're ordering a scan to check for concussion and internal trauma. She's responsive, which is good, but we need to be thorough. I nodded, unable to speak. While we waited, Lily curled against my chest, exhausted from the ordeal. Her sobs had softened into whimpers, but every time she shifted, every time she whimpered, I felt fresh waves of guilt and rage battering my ribs. I replayed the moment over and over in my head, like a nightmare on a loop. The way Peter had held her, the way he had looked at me, smirking before she slipped from his hands, the way he hadn't even moved to catch her. There was no way in hell I was imagining it, no way to excuse it, and no way I was letting it slide. An hour later, the doctor returned with the results. She crouched beside me, her voice low but firm. She has a mild bump and some bruising, but no signs of skull fracture or serious internal injury. You're lucky you brought her in quickly. We'll need you to monitor her closely for signs of concussion over the next 48 hours. Vomiting, excessive sleepiness, loss of balance. But right now, she's stable. I squeezed my eyes shut for a moment, a sob of relief clawing up my throat. Stable. Alive. Still mine. The doctor hesitated, then said, quietly, "Given what you described, would you like to file a report? We're mandatory reporters. We can document everything, but the decision to involve law enforcement starts with you." I looked down at Lily, still clutching her stuffed lamb with tiny, bruised fingers. Her world was trust, fragile, complete, and utterly dependent on me. My reflection stared back at me from the window behind the doctor, wild-eyed, disheveled, broken. I thought about the silence I grew up with, about the bruises explained away, the screams swallowed down. Not this time. "Yes," I said, my voice hoarse but certain. "I want to file a report." The doctor nodded solemnly. "We'll get the paperwork started." I kissed Lily's hair, breathing in the baby shampoo scent, and whispered so only she could hear, "They're never going to hurt you the way they hurt me. I swear it." Outside, the sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving only a dim, bruised purple sky. Inside me, the first flickers of something colder, sharper than fear had begun to take root. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was war. The next morning, I sat in my tiny living room, Lily asleep across my lap, her breathing soft and steady against my chest. The house was silent, but my heart wouldn't settle. Every creak of the floorboards made my skin prickle. Every knock of the branches against the window made me jump. When the doorbell finally rang, I almost didn't answer it, but I forced myself up, adjusting Lily carefully, and opened the door to find two police officers standing on my porch. Officer Reynolds was tall and broad-shouldered, with gray threading through his hair at the temples. His partner, Officer Novak, was younger, twitchier, fingers tapping a notepad even before he introduced himself. "Caroline Adams?" Reynolds asked. I nodded. "We're here to follow up on a report filed last night regarding an incident involving a minor," he said, his voice low but kind. "May we come in?" I stepped aside, heart hammering, suddenly aware of every detail of my messy living room. The scattered toys, the laundry I hadn't folded, the dishes in the sink, none of it mattered now. They settled into the worn armchairs, and I sat back down, Lily still in my arms. She stirred but didn't wake. "Whenever you're ready," Reynolds said gently. I took a breath and began. I told them everything. The party, Peter's words, the way he held Lily like she was something dirty, the smirk on his face, the stumble that wasn't a stumble, the way no one else moved to help, like fear had frozen the room in amber. As I spoke, the bitterness coated my tongue, but I didn't stop. Novak scribbled furiously, while Reynolds just listened, his eyes never leaving mine. When I finished, Reynolds leaned forward slightly. "This was at a family gathering," he clarified. "Yes, at my father's house." "Were there witnesses?" I laughed bitterly before I could stop myself. "Everyone was there, but I doubt anyone will say anything." They exchanged a glance. "We'll still need the names," Novak said, tapping his pen against his notepad. I hesitated. Giving them the names felt like another betrayal layered on top of a betrayal. But then I looked down at Lily, her small hand curled around my shirt. This wasn't about loyalty. It never had been. It was about her. I rattled off the list of attendees, watching Novak's pen fly across the paper. When they stood to leave, Reynolds paused at the door. "I know this isn't easy," he said, "especially when it's family." "It's not family anymore," I said quietly. Reynolds nodded once, as if sealing a silent pact, and then they were gone. The door clicked shut behind them, and for a long time I just stood there, staring at it. That evening my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me press answer. "Caroline!" a woman's voice said, hesitant, almost scared. "Yes." It's Samantha. From the party." I froze. My cousin. The only one whose eyes had widened in horror when Lily hit the floor. She faltered. "I just wanted to say, I saw what happened. I believe you." I gripped the phone so tightly it hurt. "Thank you," I whispered, the words cracking apart as they left my throat. "I don't know what I can do," she said, voice shaking. "But if you need someone to tell the truth, I will." Tears blurred my vision. For the first time since the nightmare began, I didn't feel completely alone. After we hung up, I sat back on the couch, Lily snuggled against me, and stared out the window at the darkening sky. The house was still quiet, but inside me something new was stirring. Not just rage, not just fear. Hope. A small, stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, the truth would finally be louder than the silence. The first call came the next morning. I was feeding Lily oatmeal, her tiny hands reaching eagerly for the spoon, when the phone buzzed across the counter. I didn't recognize the number, but something deep in my chest tightened before I even picked it up. "Caroline!" My mother's voice came through the line, thinner than I remembered, like it had been stretched too tight over old bones. "Mom," I said carefully, shifting Lily onto my hip. "Are you all right?" she asked, and for a moment, just a moment, it sounded like she meant it. "Lily's okay," I said. "Bruised, but okay." There was a pause long enough for me to hear the faint whir of her kitchen fan through the phone. Then she said in a voice too soft to be casual, "I heard you called the police." I closed my eyes. I did. Another pause, longer this time, a silence so heavy it pressed against my ribs. "Caroline," she finally whispered, Are you sure that's necessary? The oatmeal curdled in my stomach. Yes, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. I'm sure. He didn't mean to drop her, she said quickly, like she could still pull the words back into her mouth if she said them fast enough. He's stubborn, loud, but he wouldn't hurt his own grandchild. I felt something cold uncoil in my spine. He hurt me, I said, for years, and you watched. The silence on the other end turned into something brittle and ugly. This will destroy the family, she said finally, almost pleading. It's already destroyed, I said, and hung up before I could hear her cry. I stood there for a long time, the dial tone buzzing in my ear, Lily tugging at my sleeve, oblivious to the old wars still being fought above her head. That afternoon, when I opened my front door to get the mail, a manila envelope sat on my welcome mat. No knock, no bell, just an accusation left like a dead thing on my doorstep. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed neatly in bold black letters. You always wanted attention. Now you have it. Don't pretend this is about the baby. This is about revenge. No signature, no return address, but I knew the tone. It reeked of my father's side of the family, of whispered threats and cowardice wrapped in pleasantries. I kept the envelope. Evidence, I told myself, though the truth was it felt like a wound I couldn't explain. That night, the emails started. One from a second cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. You're tearing the family apart. Be grateful your father even acknowledged you after all the mistakes you made. Another from someone who didn't even bother to sign their name. You weren't even supposed to bring that baby to the party. This is what happens when people like you forget their place. I forwarded them all to Officer Reynolds, my hand shaking, then blocked every sender. But the words lingered, bleeding into the corners of my mind. By the end of the week, I had stopped answering my phone altogether. Every unknown number felt like a loaded gun pressed against my temple. The town wasn't large. Rumors moved faster than cars on Main Street. I could feel the shift when I walked into the grocery store, the way conversations trailed off when I passed, the way old acquaintances avoided my eyes. Peter had spent years building his image here. The generous business owner, the church benefactor, the friendly neighbor who sponsored the Little League team. And I had become, overnight, the woman trying to ruin him. I should have felt afraid. Maybe a part of me did. But beneath the fear, something harder was forming. A refusal. I would not apologize for protecting my daughter. I would not pretend that what happened was an accident. I tucked Lily into bed that night, brushing a kiss across her forehead, watching her chest rise and fall in the dim light of her nightlight. And I made myself a promise. No matter how loud they shouted, no matter how cruel they became, I would not be silent again. 2 nights later, I sat at the kitchen table long after Lily had fallen asleep, the soft hum of the baby monitor my only companion. The house felt too big, too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stared at my email inbox, half dreading what new venom might be waiting, when I saw it. A new message. Subject line, I saw what happened. My heart stuttered. I hovered over it for a moment, fear whispering that it could be another trap, another knife disguised as kindness. But I clicked it open anyway. It was from Samantha. Caroline, I've been thinking about what happened ever since that day. I saw him. I saw the way he held Lily. I saw the way he let her fall. I believe you. I believed you even before this. I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I was scared. We all were. But I'm not scared anymore. If you need someone to testify, I'm here. I sat frozen for a long moment, blinking at the screen, my vision blurring. Someone saw. Someone remembered. Someone was willing to say it out loud. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear splashed onto the keyboard. I pressed my hand over my mouth to muffle the sob that clawed its way up my throat. Hope didn't come in grand gestures. It came in the form of a quiet message, written late at night by someone who decided that fear wasn't enough to keep her silent anymore. I typed back with shaking fingers. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. Within minutes, she responded. You're not alone. Not anymore. I stared at those words until they etched themselves into the cracks of my heart. The next morning, I called Officer Reynolds and told him about Samantha. That's good, he said, his voice steadier than mine. Very good. A witness who's willing to go on record changes everything. I exhaled slowly, feeling the knot in my chest loosen just a little. That day, the sun shone brighter than it had in weeks. Lily toddled around the living room, giggling at her own reflection in the sliding glass door. For the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself smile. Later that afternoon, another knock sounded at my door. I opened it cautiously, half expecting another envelope, another accusation. Instead, I found Noah. He looked older than I remembered, taller, broader, but the same quiet gentleness clung to him like a second skin. I heard what's happening, he said simply, shifting from foot to foot. I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened. I was by the hallway, he continued, voice low. When it happened, I saw the way he looked at you before he dropped her, like it was punishment. Tears pricked at my eyes again, sharper this time. I didn't know what to do, Noah whispered. Uncle Darren pulled me into the kitchen and told me to keep my mouth shut. Said girls like you always made trouble. I felt a white-hot fury ignite in my chest, but I forced myself to breathe, to stay steady. You're here now, I said quietly. He nodded, gaze steady for the first time. I'll testify, whatever you need. I should have done it then. I'm not staying silent anymore. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of years of silence, generations of swallowing truth, hung between us like a ghost. And then, without thinking, I stepped forward and hugged him. He stiffened in surprise, then hugged me back, fiercely, as if trying to squeeze out years of guilt in a single gesture. When he finally pulled away, I saw it in his eyes, the same stubborn fire I felt burning inside my own chest. We were breaking the pattern, piece by piece, person by person, and for the first time, I believed we might actually win. 2 days later, the call came. I was rocking Lily to sleep when my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. I almost ignored it, but something in me said to pick up. Caroline Adams, the voice said, rough but calm. Yes. This is Detective McLaren with Ashwood PD. I've been assigned to your case. I shifted Lily carefully into her crib, heart thudding. We've contacted several attendees from the party, he continued. Most are hesitant. Some deny seeing the fall at all. I wasn't surprised. Not really. I had grown up in a family where silence was stitched into the seams of every conversation, where looking away was a learned art form. But, McLaren added, voice sharpening slightly, your cousin Samantha provided a full statement. She says she saw him drop the baby. Says he didn't try to catch her. Tears stung the back of my eyes. I pressed a hand to my mouth. She told me, I whispered. I trust her. That helps, McLaren said simply. And there's more. We requested footage from a neighbor across the street. They've got a Ring camera facing the driveway. My breath caught. What does it show? McLaren paused. I could hear papers shuffling on his end. It doesn't capture the fall itself. The camera's angle didn't reach that far inside. But it caught what happened right after. He cleared his throat. It shows your father walking out of the house and smiling. The room tilted around me, smiling. Not immediately, McLaren clarified. He checks over his shoulder, sees that no one's watching, and then he smiles. For a second, before anyone else even moves. I gripped the edge of the counter, the cold laminate biting into my palms. We're moving forward, McLaren said. Charges will be filed. The world blurred around the edges. Relief, rage, sorrow, all twisting together so tightly I couldn't separate them. Thank you, I managed to say, my voice cracking. No need to thank me yet, he said gruffly. But you're doing the right thing. After the call ended, I sat on the floor beside Lily's crib, listening to the soft hum of her breathing. I thought about the last time Peter had ever held me. Christmas Eve. I must have been 9. I had gotten a B on a spelling test and cried about it. I remembered him grabbing my wrist, so hard it bruised, his face inches from mine as he hissed, "I don't raise weak stock." That night, he didn't look at me once during dinner. By 16, we barely spoke at all unless he was yelling. When I chose social work instead of business school, he told me I was a waste, that I'd be cleaning up after other people's failures for the rest of my life, that I would come crawling back, that no man would ever want a woman like me, that if I ever had a child out of wedlock, he'd disown me. I guess he was just keeping his promise. 2 nights after McLaren's call, my doorbell rang. I hesitated, then peeked through the window. It was Ellen. She stood stiffly on the porch, clutching a store-bought pie like a shield. I didn't want to let her in, but some foolish part of me, some part that still craved closure, opened the door anyway. 5 minutes, I said. She nodded quickly, stepping inside like she was afraid to disturb the air itself. "I told him it wasn't okay," she said immediately, perching on the edge of the couch. "I told Peter he needed to apologize." I raised an eyebrow. "And did he?" She looked down at her hands. "He doesn't do apologies." I laughed, a harsh, humorless sound that scraped my throat raw. "No," I said. "He writes anonymous letters and lets babies hit the floor." Her face flushed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she whispered, "I understand why you're doing this. I don't blame you. But be ready, Caroline. He's not going down quietly." I stood there for a moment, looking at this woman who had married into our rot and chosen to marinate in it rather than break free. "I know," I said, "and I'm ready." She left the pie untouched on the coffee table, like an offering that meant nothing. When the door closed behind her, I felt the weight of it all settle onto my shoulders. The court battle was coming. The storm was almost here. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of it. The next morning it began. First, an email. No greeting. No signature. Just 2 lines, typed in black font that seemed to scream across the screen. "You're a liar. You're destroying a good man over one mistake." I stared at it, heart pounding, ball rising in my throat. I forwarded it to Detective McLaren without a second thought. I blocked the sender, but it lingered in the air under my skin, in the small, shivering spaces between my bones. That afternoon, a second letter arrived in the mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a single sentence, typed in blocky font, the paper creased and stained like it had been crushed in an angry fist. "You were never supposed to be part of this family." No signature, no courage, just the familiar cowardice of people who had perfected cruelty into an art form. I filed that one too, and still it kept coming. Phone calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I let them all go to voicemail. Some left messages, whispered accusations, gaslighting so thick it oozed through the phone. "You're imagining things. You always were dramatic. You're trying to ruin a man's life because you can't control your own." I stopped checking my voicemail altogether. At the grocery store, I caught the looks, quick glances over shoulders, murmured gossip that stopped when I passed. A woman who used to sit beside my mother at church turned her cart sharply to avoid me in the produce aisle. Outside the post office, 2 men in Rotary Club jackets laughed just a little too loudly when I walked by. The town wasn't just whispering anymore. It was choosing sides, and most of them weren't choosing me. One evening, after I put Lily down for the night, I sat at the kitchen table, the house heavy with silence. Samantha texted me. "Got a call from Aunt Joanna. She told me to do the right thing and stay silent. Said this isn't what family does to each other." I stared at the screen, the rage bubbling under my ribs. "Family," I typed back, "isn't supposed to let babies fall on purpose. Family isn't supposed to cover it up." Samantha replied immediately. "I'm still with you, no matter what they say." I swallowed down the tears and typed back, simply, Thank you. Later that night, as I was locking the front door, another knock startled me. I froze, adrenaline surging, heart racing. Slowly, I peeked through the peephole. À pied, sitting on the porch. No note this time. No Person in Sicht. I didn't touch it. I left it there until morning, when I dumped it straight into the trash bin, the ceramic plate smashing at the bottom like the brittle bones of the past I was trying to break away from. The next day, Noah called. She's mad, he said. Joanna, Darren, everyone, they're saying you're ungrateful, that you're bringing shame to the family. I almost laughed. The family that hadn't defended a child from falling out of a monster's arms was worried about shame? They're scared, Noah said after a moment. His voice was steady, stronger than before. They should be, I said quietly. We stayed on the phone for a while after that, not saying much, but not hanging up either. Outside, the wind howled against the windows. Inside, Lily stirred in her sleep, her small hand clutching her stuffed lamb. I sat by her crib, watching her chest rise and fall, and made another silent promise. Let them send their letters. Let them whisper in church pews and grocery store aisles. Let them pretend they were protecting something noble when all they were doing was preserving rot. I wasn't backing down. Not this time. Not ever. The memories came at night. I would lie in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling, Lily's soft breathing drifting from the baby monitor, and the past would unfurl itself like a poisonous vine, creeping under my skin, wrapping around my throat. I remembered the first time my father hit me. I was 8. I had dropped a glass of milk at dinner, the puddle spreading across the tablecloth like an accusation. Peter's face had gone red, his voice low and deadly as he grabbed my wrist and yanked me out of the chair. Weakness is a disease, he had hissed, squeezing so tightly I thought the bones would snap. Later, my mother had pressed an ice pack against my wrist without a word. No comfort, no outrage, just silent acceptance. It had been like that my whole life. Pain swept under the rug. Fear locked behind smiling doors. On my 9th birthday, I cried when my cake collapsed because I had insisted on carrying it myself. Peter had laughed, not the warm, indulgent laugh of a father amused by his child's mistake, but a sharp, slicing sound that made my cheeks burn with shame. Get used to disappointment, he had said, ruffling my hair like an afterthought. I remembered the time in high school when I brought home a B instead of an A, how he had slammed his fist into the wall inches from my face, how I had flinched, how he had smiled, how no one said a word at dinner that night, as I sat there shaking, forcing down forkfuls of mashed potatoes I couldn't taste. And later, when I chose social work over finance, when I said I didn't want to run his precious home improvement business, he had stared at me like I had spat in his face. You'll come crawling back, he had said. Mark my words, Caroline. No man will want you. You'll end up barefoot and broken, just like the garbage you think you're saving. I had packed my things that same night and left for college 2 states away. I thought I had escaped. But the thing about ghosts is they don't stay buried just because you close your eyes. I found the old photo album buried in a box in the back of my closet. It had been years since I touched it, years since I wanted to. I flipped through the stiff, glossy pages, birthday parties where I was shoved into the corner of the frame, family vacations where I was a blurred, half-smiling afterthought. And then there it was, a picture I had forgotten existed. Me, sitting on the back porch steps, maybe 10 years old, a faint bruise blooming on my cheekbone, a forced smile stretched across my face, brittle and thin. My mother standing behind me, her eyes not on me, but staring off into the distance, like she didn't even see me. I traced the photograph with my fingertips, the paper cool and slick beneath my skin. And I realized something. This wasn't just about Lily. It wasn't just about one party, one fall. It was about a lifetime of being told that I didn't matter. It was about breaking a cycle so deeply ingrained that even now, with the evidence bleeding through every inch of my life, they were still trying to convince me to stay silent. I scanned the photo and saved it, not as evidence, but as a reminder. A promise. Lily would not grow up learning that love meant survival. She would not learn to mistake fear for loyalty. She would not spend her life apologizing for existing. I would build her a different world, even if I had to tear the old one down with my bare hands. The courthouse looked smaller than I remembered. Ashwood's town hall, an aging brick building with peeling white trim, had always seemed imposing when I was a child, a place of unspoken rules and silent consequences. Now, as I pushed Lily's stroller up the cracked sidewalk, the weight of everything we were about to face pressed against my ribs like an invisible hand. Celia Ward, my attorney, met me at the front steps. Sharp in her navy blazer, calm as ever, she placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "We don't have to win everything today," she said quietly. "We just have to show them there's something worth fighting for." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Inside, the courtroom was nearly empty. A few townspeople scattered across the pews in the back, faces I recognized but couldn't name. 2 reporters perched near the door, pens ready. At the front, Peter Adams sat with his lawyer. Joel Keller, slick, polished, with the kind of practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Peter didn't look at me as we entered. He sat stiffly, hands folded on the table, face blank, rehearsed. But I saw it, the slight tightening of his jaw, the faint flicker of disdain when his gaze briefly flicked to Lily's stroller. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't ashamed. He was furious. The judge, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a sharper voice, called the session to order. Celia stood first, her voice even, crisp, deliberate. She painted the picture, clearly, the party, the history of verbal abuse, the fall, the bruising documented by medical professionals, the footage of Peter smiling moments after Lily hit the floor. Every word landed like a stone in the stillness. Then she called Samantha to the stand. Samantha's hands trembled slightly as she was sworn in, but when she spoke, her voice was clear. "I saw him drop her," she said. "It wasn't clumsy. It wasn't an accident. He shifted his grip and he let go." Joel Keller objected, of course, called it hearsay emotional exaggeration. But the judge overruled him with a curt nod. When it was Noah's turn, he stood straighter than I had ever seen him. "I was standing by the archway," he said. "I saw the way he looked at Caroline, like he wanted to hurt her. Dropping Lily wasn't an accident. It was a message." Joel Keller's strategy shifted quickly after that. He attacked me instead, painted me as unstable, vindictive, a single mother overwhelmed by stress, desperate for attention. He brought up Mark, Lily's father who had walked away before she was born, as if my relationship failures somehow proved I was unreliable. He questioned my finances, my career choices, even the fact that I had left home at 19. He painted me as a woman looking for someone to blame for her broken life. But Celia was ready. When Keller suggested that I had exaggerated Lily's injuries for sympathy, Celia stood so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Let the court note," she said, her voice sharp, that a licensed physician documented the bruising, noted concussion risks, and recommended immediate observation. That is not exaggeration. That is medical fact. The judge nodded slightly, her pen scratching across her notes. Keller sat down after that, his face tight with frustration. When closing arguments finished, the judge leaned forward, her hand steepled. "I will review the evidence and issue a ruling within 3 days." Her voice was final, unyielding. Outside, the air was crisp and biting. I wrapped Lily tighter in her blanket and walked slowly down the courthouse steps. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt hollow, like I had been holding my breath for weeks, and still couldn't exhale. "Samantha," and Noah waited by the sidewalk. Noah gave a small nod, his hands stuffed awkwardly into his jacket pockets. Samantha hugged me without a word, and for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like I was standing alone in the ruins. I was building something new, brick by brick, truth by truth, no matter how long it took. The rain started the morning the judge called. It wasn't a heavy, dramatic storm, the kind you see in movies when something big happens. No, it was the quiet kind of rain, steady and persistent, tapping against the windows like an old friend reminding you they're still there. I was spoon-feeding Lily oatmeal when the phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. Some part of me was afraid that if I answered, the world would collapse all over again. But I did. Caroline. Celia's voice, calm but tight. Yes. She ruled in our favor. For a moment, I didn't understand the words. She what? The judge. She found sufficient cause to move the case forward. Formal charges will be filed against Peter Adams. I closed my eyes, pressing a hand against my mouth as the oatmeal grew cold in front of me. We had done it. We hadn't won the war, but we had won the first battle. The door to justice hadn't just cracked open, it had swung wide. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely more than a breath. You did this, Celia said. You and the truth. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the rain ticking against the windows, Lily humming to herself in her high chair. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe without 1,000 pounds pressing down on my chest. That afternoon, news traveled fast. It always did in Ashwood. By sunset, the town's Facebook groups were buzzing, rumors, half-truths, people picking sides like it was a football game. Some called it a witch hunt. Some said they always knew Peter Adams wasn't the man he pretended to be. A few even sent private messages, quiet confessions of their own. Thank you for speaking. I wish I had your courage. I wish someone had spoken for me. I sat in the living room that evening, the house dim and still, reading those messages one by one, and I realized something. This wasn't just about me. It never had been. It was about every child who had been told to shut up, every woman who had been gaslit into silence, every person who had been taught that survival was something shameful. Later, after Lily fell asleep, I bundled her up in her tiny pink jacket and carried her to the park across town. The rain had stopped by then, leaving the world damp and sparkling under the streetlights. I sat on the same old bench Peter used to sit on when I was a child, when he would bark at me to climb higher, run faster, stop crying. But tonight, the bench didn't feel haunted. It felt reclaimed. Lily toddled in front of me, her tiny boots splashing in leftover puddles, her laughter ringing out into the cool evening air. I watched her, this small, fierce miracle, and I whispered, half to her, half to the broken girl I used to be. You'll never have to wonder if your voice matters. Not in this house. Not with this mother. The wind picked up, tugging at the leaves, carrying my promise into the night. And for the first time I knew, deep down in the marrow of my bones, that no matter what came next, we were going to be okay, because we had already done the hardest thing. We had refused to stay silent. The weeks that followed were a strange kind of quiet, not peaceful, not yet, but different, like the town was holding its breath, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. Peter's legal team moved fast, filing motion after motion to delay the trial, to discredit the charges, to bury me under paperwork and fear. But Celia moved faster. Every baseless accusation they threw at us, she knocked aside with calm precision. Every smear attempt, she met with documentation, timelines, hard facts. They called me unstable. We showed hospital reports. They said I exaggerated. We showed footage. They tried to drown me in noise. We answered with silence and truth. Meanwhile, life went on in small, stubborn ways. Lily learned how to say "Mama" clearly, her voice high and proud. She discovered puddles and crayons and the endless joy of knocking over block towers I spent hours building. I learned to sleep again, a little. I learned to answer the door without flinching, sometimes. I learned that healing isn't a straight line. It's a labyrinth you crawl through, bloody and broken, until one day you realize you're not crawling anymore. You're walking. You're standing. You're breathing free air again. One evening, Samantha came by with groceries, unasked, unannounced. She sat at my kitchen table, like she belonged there, like we had spent our whole lives being sisters instead of cousins, separated by decades of silence. "They're still mad at me," she said, poking at a bruised apple. "I know," I said. She shrugged, a small, defiant smile curling her lips. "I don't care. They were never really family. Not the way that matters." I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Noah called, too, sometimes late at night when the weight got too heavy. We didn't always talk about the case. Sometimes we talked about old movies, about books we were reading, about nothing at all. And that was healing, too. Knowing that the world didn't end at the edges of our pain. Knowing there was life beyond it. The trial date was set for 6 months later. It would be brutal. I knew that. They would drag every skeleton from my closet, pick apart my life until there was nothing left untouched. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because I wasn't fighting to win back a family that had never loved me. I was fighting to build something new, something real, for me, for Lily, for every silent voice that had been taught to whisper instead of scream. One rainy Saturday afternoon, I found myself back at the park, Lily toddling beside me, chubby fingers gripping mine. We passed the old bench where Peter used to sit, and I realized I didn't feel the old sting anymore. It was just a bench now, just wood and bolts and memories that no longer had claws. I lifted Lily onto a swing, her giggles lighting up the gray sky, and for a moment, just a moment, the world felt right. Not perfect, but ours. I sat back, letting her swing higher, her laughter carrying across the empty playground. And I thought, this is what victory looks like. Not courtrooms, not verdicts, not headlines, but this, a child who knows she is loved, a mother who knows she is enough, a future unchained from the failures of the past. We didn't win everything yet. We might lose battles ahead, but we had already won the war that mattered most. We chose to live out loud. We chose to stay free. We chose each other. And no one, no whisper, no letter, no legacy of silence could ever take that away.